On April 18, 1945, at just past dawn, the chill of early spring lingered over the shattered streets of Leipzig, Germany. The air was thick with the acrid scent of smoke, remnants of fires that had long since ravaged the landscape. American soldiers, weary but vigilant, trudged through the debris-strewn paths, their boots echoing against the charred remnants of once proud buildings. Around them, the distant rumble of artillery served as a constant reminder of the chaos that had engulfed Europe for years, a war that had left scars deep within the hearts of nations. The soldiers moved with a mix of purpose and unease, their eyes scanning the surroundings for any sign of enemy combatants. But here, amidst the destruction, they found something that would shift the trajectory of their mission. Crumbling walls and abandoned cars told stories of lives interrupted, yet there was a heavier silence, a weight that went beyond the physical landscape. It hung in the air, an unspoken acknowledgement of the loss that had gripped this land. As they rounded a corner, a flicker of movement caught their attention. Peering cautiously, they were met not with combatants, but with the frail figures of children, dust-caked and hollow-eyed, darting among the ruins. Orphaned and alone, these small shadows navigated the rubble, mirroring the heart-wrenching desolation that surrounded them. For the American soldiers, accustomed to the tumult of battle and the camaraderie forged in conflict, this revelation struck a chord deeper than any enemy encounter. Among them was Sergeant John Miller, a man whose tough exterior had been tempered by compassion. He had seen the worst of humanity and was now confronted with the innocence of its most vulnerable. The sight of these children, their tattered clothing hanging loosely on malnourished frames, evoked a fierce protectiveness within him. Realizing these kids were just casualties of a war that had spun far beyond their control, John felt a surge of responsibility. Being from towns where every meal was cherished, the soldiers had their own rations, yet they felt compelled to share anything they could muster. With rations dwindling, the impending parental figures of these foreign children became a symbol of hope against the ravages of war. As the soldiers gathered the meager contents of their supplies, a blend of canned food, chocolate bars, and biscuits, John could feel the warmth of humanity blooming within their unit. They were not mere soldiers in an orchestra of destruction. They were caretakers in a landscape desperate for healing. Just then, a nearby explosion sent a tremor through the ground, pulling their focus back to the warfare surrounding them. The soldiers instinctively raised their weapons, but John gestured for them to lower their arms. This was not about revenge. It was about survival. As they crouched down, presenting their humble offerings of food to the scrawny children, the essence of their mission began to shift. From combatants to guardians, the soldiers were now becoming a tether of hope in a world torn apart by division. In that moment, the chilling reality of war felt almost surreal. The survival of these children symbolized the very essence of humanity, the desire to protect, to nourish, and to rebuild. As they dispensed their rations with trembling hands, each child's hesitant smile ignited something within the hearts of the soldiers. They realized they had become part of something larger than themselves, a collective struggle against the very forces that sought to divide and destroy. Reflecting on the years of relentless battle, John understood the irony of their situation. Here they were, in the heart of a devastated enemy territory, extending their hands not in combat, but in compassion. The war had made them fighters, but in this exchange they became saviors, blurring the line between friend and foe, revealing the shared humanity that persisted even in the darkest of times. Thus, in the ruins of Leipzig, a seed of change began to take root, evidence that even amid ashes, hope could arise, seeking to mend a world so frayed by conflict. The air was thick with the acrid scent of smoke and the echoes of gunfire, a haunting soundtrack to the destruction that surrounded them. It was early evening on April 15, 1945, and the dull glow of the setting sun cast eerie shadows over the decimated landscape of a battered German village. Piles of rubble replaced homes, and the cries of distant artillery mingled with an overwhelming silence that hung heavily over the remnants of what was once a vibrant community. As the American soldiers sifted through the debris, their boots crunched on shattered glass and splintered wood. Each step felt laden with the weight of history, an agonizing reminder of the lives upended by war. Their mission was to secure the area, to advance in the name of freedom, yet uncertainty gnawed at their spirits. With every corner turned, with every wall that stood partially erect, the reality of war's consequence pressed down on them more and more. Suddenly, a soft whimper pierced the heavy atmosphere. The soldiers halted, their eyes drawn to a dilapidated alleyway where a small band of children huddled together, their frail bodies a stark contrast against the wreckage of their former lives. Emaciated figures with hollow faces stared back at the soldiers with desperate, haunting eyes, a mirror of innocence lost amidst chaos. A pang of sorrow mixed with guilt swelled within the hearts of those battle-worn men, far removed from the childhood laughter and warmth they once knew. As silence enveloped the moment, the soldiers exchanged glances, their resolve faltering. Were they not the liberators, tasked with bringing hope and aid to a requiem of destruction? Yet here, in this crumbling alley, hope was a flicker, extinguished by hunger and despair. They hesitated, their instinct to act sealed by the grim reality manifesting before them. Each soldier knew the dogs of war had no consideration for age. The orphan's pleading eyes bore witness to a universal truth, echoing through the ages. Survival often demands difficult choices. In every soldier's heart lingered the vague memories of their own homes, shared meals, comforting embraces, and the laughter of loved ones. The juxtaposition of their lives and those of the children weighed heavily upon them. One soldier, Private James Miller, finally stepped forward, the rest of the group instinctively following his lead. He reached into his rations, pulling out a meager portion meant to sustain him through the remnants of this harrowing journey. But in that moment, he knew nourishment would do little in the absence of compassion. The food became a symbol of the humanity they could no longer ignore. As he knelt before the children, his voice quivered with kindness. "Hey there! It's all right. We're here to help." With that, the barrier of language dissolved, replaced by an understanding more profound than words. He extended his hand, sharing not just food, but a flicker of hope amidst despair. The other soldiers rallied behind him, their own rations offered without hesitation, as they formed a protective circle around the frightened children. In that singular moment, a bond emerged, transcending nationality and allegiance. A realization that the wounds of war were not solely marked in the hearts of soldiers. The soldiers discovered that empathy could flourish even in the direst of circumstances. and that true victory lay not just in conquest, but in compassion and shared humanity. The hunger of the body may have driven the children to scavenge, but the indomitable spirit of kindness, awakened within the soldiers, called them to action. The children clambered forward, reaching for morsels of bread and packets of biscuits, their fingers trembling in both anticipation and fear. A small hand clasped James's, the silent agreement to bridge the chasm of despair. As twilight wrapped its cloak over the village, the soldiers forged a new purpose, one that went beyond the battlefield, challenging the very foundation of their mission. They stood as reluctant protectors, their hearts swelling with an understanding that in this war-torn land, they too were orphans. Orphans of peace in a world ravaged by conflict. Yet in the face of survival, they were drawn into a moral confrontation, realizing that to share in this fleeting humanity might require a sacrifice greater than that of their rations. It was a choice that could redefine their own sense of identity forevermore. And as they gathered around the children, hunger mingled with hope, creating a moment destined to transcend the fallacies of war itself. This was only the beginning. Amidst the cold, gray dawn of April 1945, the sounds of distant artillery echoed in the frosty air. The ground trembled with the weight of war, yet in a small village just outside of Stuttgart, something far more profound unfolded. A desperate cry for help echoed through the rubble of once vibrant homes. It was here, in a broken land, that an unexpected encounter altered the course of fate. A group of American soldiers, weary from relentless battles, stumbled upon the remnants of a family home. Charred walls stood like sentinels, guarding the ghosts of lives once lived. In the hollow silence, their breaths hung heavy as they discovered two small, orphaned German children, huddled together for warmth. The children, no older than 5 and 7, wore tattered clothes and eyes wide with fear, clouded by the horrors they had witnessed. Sergeant Miller, a man hardened by combat but soft-hearted at his core, knelt as he reached out a hand. The moment their gazes met, time seemed to pause. A flicker of humanity shone through the darkest shadows of war. The soldiers knew the risks of sympathy. Sharing rations could mean facing starvation in the days to come. Yet the sight of the children stirred something profound within their hearts. In that instance, images of their own families flooded back, memories of laughter and love overshadowed by a sense of duty. With the rations dwindling as each day passed, the soldiers gathered around a small campfire one evening. The fire crackled against the oppressive silence. Sergeant Miller glanced at his comrades. Private Jenkins, known for his dry humor during grim moments, and Corporal Harrison, the unyielding protector of the group. They all shared a silent understanding. They could not turn their backs on those innocent lives. As night fell and darkness cloaked the village, they huddled together, their rations laid bare before them. Through the flickering flames, they smiled at the children, their faces illuminated by an ethereal glow. It was not just food they would be sharing, it was hope. With a deep breath, Sergeant Miller dug into the meager supply, producing an apple, its red skin glistening in the dim light. He knelt before the little girl, her eyes wide with anticipation. With a gentle smile, he offered her the fruit. For a moment, the harsh realities of their world faded into the background. The girl's hands trembled as she accepted the gift, a simple act transformed into a symbol of shared humanity amidst desolation. Tears glistened in her eyes, and in that fleeting exchange, the line between enemy and savior blurred. The soldiers watched as she took a small bite, her face breaking into a hesitant smile. Gratitude lit up the dim confines of their hearts, a flame warming the bonds forged in adversity. For one brief moment, the chaos of war was eclipsed by the innate goodness that resides in humanity. The children shared giggles. The soldiers felt a sense of purpose that transcended their previous duties. This act of sharing was not just about survival, it was about connection. Reminders that even in the darkest of times, compassion could shine through. As the night deepened, laughter echoed against the wreckage, a melody of hope against the haunting backdrop of war. In their longing glances at each other, an unspoken pact emerged. They would not abandon these children to the brutality that had already stripped them of so much. This was their turning point, a merging of fears and aspirations, where survival met compassion. The soldiers found themselves reflecting on what it truly meant to be human. War had taught them to be cautious, to see threats lurking in every shadow. Yet here, in the glow of that fire, they discovered the profound strength found in vulnerability. Together, they could face the uncertainties, not just as soldiers, but as protectors of innocence. As dawn broke over the fractured landscape, it illuminated their decision, a decision that would alter the destinies not only of the soldiers and the children, but of an entire generation striving to emerge from the ashes of despair. They were united in something greater than conflict. They were bound by their shared humanity. Now they would fight, not just for victory, but for those who couldn't fight for themselves, a legacy that would ripple far beyond the battlefield. In moments of despair, compassion can offer the most profound form of resistance. As the winter sun slipped languidly over the horizon on December 15, 1944, a biting wind howled through the remnants of a once bustling German town. Shadows danced across crumbling walls, echoing the laughter of children now long gone. The air, heavy with the scent of smoke and despair, grew thicker as the days passed. Time was slipping away, and with it, the dwindling ration supplies meant for the American soldiers. In the heart of this haunting landscape, the bond between the soldiers and the orphaned children deepened. Corporal Hayes, known for his steadfast resolve, felt the weight of every empty plate as they sat around their makeshift camp. His eyes landed on Gisela, a frail blonde girl with eyes wide and pleading, who had come to symbolize the hope lingering amidst their struggles. The sight of the children's emaciated forms haunted him, their laughter now replaced with silent gazes of desperation. With each passing meal, the soldiers witnessed the escalation of their own internal conflict. The rations, their lifeline, were evaporating rapidly. As supplies ran low, the camaraderie among the troops began to fray. Conversations turned into whispers, each comment laced with anxiety regarding the next distribution of food. Sergeant Thompson, a stalwart leader who had previously motivated his fellow soldiers through harrowing battles, now found himself unable to inspire them amid this drawn-out crisis. His once confident voice trembled during their nightly briefings, an uncharacteristic falter that echoed the fear brewing in their hearts. And then the inevitable happened. Private Morgan, a young man barely out of his teens, fell ill. The fatigue that clung to him had long been dismissed as weariness, but it quickly became clear that he was not just tired. As he lay shivering in a makeshift bunk, The group gathered anxiously around him, faces drawing tight with concern. The relentless cold seeped deeper into their bones, but the gravity of Morgan's condition cast a heavier pall over their spirits. Each soldier felt the burden of sacrifice keenly, understanding that sharing their rations with the frail children had led to this weariness. Captain Reynolds, who endlessly held hope at the forefront, wrestled with the ethical dilemma as he watched his men crack under the pressure. How much longer could they endure? The children, who had become their motivation, now reflected the consequences of their kindness. Every portion given away nudged them closer to desperation. Just as uncertainty threatened to swallow them, they gathered around the fire one frigid evening. The shadows flickered in the glow, revealing a moment of shared vulnerability. "We fight, not just for our country," Sergeant Thompson voiced softly, "but for the humanity we refuse to abandon." The conviction in his words managed to ignite a flicker of resolve within the weary hearts surrounding him. But could it hold them together? The curse of famine loomed over them. Hunger gnawed at their bellies, and the specter of illness whispered through the camp, threatening to tear apart the fragile thread binding their makeshift family. The struggle was palpable, perilous. It painted every decision they faced with urgency. Yet, in witnessing the resilience of the children, the soldiers drew strength, fanning the flickers of resolve against the storm of despair. As a thick silence fell over the night, every soldier lay beneath the vast, star-speckled sky, wrestling with the irony of it all. They were part of a colossal operation aimed to liberate, yet here they were, contending with an onset of a different war, one that tested their spirit beyond the battlefield. This arduous reality forged complex reflections within each soldier's mind. How far would they go to protect the innocent when the thunder of gunfire faded, leaving silence only to be filled with cries for survival? In preserving the lives of those children, the soldiers were not merely sustaining another's existence. They were redefining their own. The struggle for survival continued to escalate, wrapping them all in a cocoon of desperation that threatened to unravel with every fading hope of rations fading. The sun hung low in the sky on a chilly March afternoon in 1945, casting long shadows over the makeshift camp where the weary American soldiers gathered. The faint scent of smoke lingered in the air, mingling with the palpable tension that clung to the confines of their small enclave. Each man could hear the distant echoes of artillery, a grim reminder of their military duties. But on this day, their hearts were heavy with a different kind of battle. Sergeant John Miller, the man in charge, stood at the forefront of the group, his expression a mixture of resolve and uncertainty. Just days ago, they had stumbled upon a group of orphaned German children, their gaunt faces revealing the horrors of a war they did not choose. The harsh reality that these innocents were starving weighed heavily on the soldiers, affecting their morale in ways the enemy never could. "We can't let them suffer," John declared, his voice forthright yet tinged with frustration. The men looked at one another, each wrestling with their own thoughts. The rations were dwindling, their supplies lessening the longer they remained on the front lines. Yet the children's pleading eyes haunted them, igniting a flicker of human compassion that fought valiantly against their ingrained sense of duty. Private Mike Thompson, typically light-hearted, stood silent, his gaze lost as he replayed the children's sobs in his mind. "But it's dangerous out there, Sergeant. We could be risking our lives for what?" His words hung in the air, dripping with doubt and fear. Around him, murmurs of agreement surfaced, some men nodding, others averting their eyes, unable to confront the implications of choosing between their safety and the welfare of those needy souls. "I understand your concerns," John replied, scanning the faces of the men before him. "But what kind of men are we if we turn our backs when we have the power to help? They're children, lost and alone." As hope flickered in John's heart, the soldiers could see the conviction in his eyes swell to strength. The group fell into a heavy silence, each man reflecting on their own experiences, the sacrifices made, and the toll taken by the brutal conflict that now surrounded them. "I couldn't sleep at night knowing they were out there," murmured Private Jim Rivers, his voice betraying the rippling emotions that had been building. John nodded solemnly, feeling the shift within the group. It was not just their hearts that had been unlocked, but also an understanding of their shared humanity, a realization that transcended borders, uniforms, and ideology. "Let's make a plan," he said softly, but with newfound determination. "We split into 2 teams. One will stay here to protect the children. The other will scout the nearby town for supplies. We can't afford to lose our lives over this, but we can't afford to turn away either." The men, now ignited by purpose, rallied around John's call, casting off their hesitation for a moment. The weight they carried collectively began to lift as they leaned into their sense of duty, not just to their nation, but to something far more profound: compassion. As night settled in, they prepared for the risky operation with determination in their hearts. It was a moment of uncharacteristic defiance against the chaos of the world around them, a glimpse into a kindness rarely seen in battle. They knew the path ahead might be fraught with dangers, but the thought of the children being safe, even if just for one more night, forged an unbreakable bond between them, a bond as strong as any forged in the heat of combat. While they packed their gear, a fragile hope blossomed amongst the men. That hope would soon propel them into the cold night, their mission now clear: to seek out food for those innocent lives and perhaps feed their own souls, in the process ensuring that in their darkest hour, compassion could conquer the inhumanity of war. The soldiers took one last look at the children, who were nestled close together, unaware of the dangerous world outside. They moved forward, knowing that this was not just a mission. It was a turning point, a chance to rewrite the narrative of their experience in this ravaged landscape. In the bitter cold of early March 1945, just past midnight, a moonlit sky blanketed the snow-covered ruins of a once vibrant German town. The air was heavy with tension, thick enough to taste, the silence punctuated only by distant echoes of gunfire, a haunting reminder of the chaotic battleground that lay beyond the soldiers' fragile sanctuary. The flickering glow from their meager campfires contrasted sharply against the darkened silhouettes of the surrounding landscapes, revealing weary faces forged in resolve. The American soldiers, fresh from relentless engagements, had become unexpectedly united by a shared burden. Their mission was daunting. Under the pall of darkness, they would venture into enemy lines to scavenge for much-needed supplies, not for themselves, but for the vulnerable, orphaned children they had found abandoned in the chaos of war. Each soldier understood the risk of stepping away from their protected perimeter. Each stride forward a gamble against the unseen dangers lurking just outside the flicker of their light. Among them was Sergeant Thomas Harris, a man who had seen more than his fair share of battle. His steely gray eyes reflected both a depth of courage and the dread of loss. He had taken it upon himself to lead this expedition, whispering promises of care and protection as they huddled close. "We do this for them," he said, voice low yet firm. "Not for glory, but for a future they can believe in." As they slipped out into the night, the ground beneath their boots crunched with each careful step, a sound amplified in the stillness. Nearby, the children they sought to protect slept dreaming of warmth and safety, unaware of the peril receding away from their makeshift shelter. The soldiers relied on the dim light of the stars to guide them, navigating through the treacherous paths woven between desolate buildings that had once been teeming with life. Suddenly, a sharp crack pierced the night, followed by the thud of feet pounding against the earth. The sound of guards changing posts echoed from a nearby observation tower, sending a shiver down their spines. Every heartbeat felt like a countdown. With the adrenaline surging, they ducked behind the crumbled remnants of a wall, breaths held tightly in their chests, eyes flicking to one another in silent communication. "Stay low, move fast," Harris instructed, his voice barely above a whisper. The soldiers exchanged glances that spoke volumes. Bravery was their only option. The urgency of the moment layered upon their shoulders, spurred by the faces of the innocent children who depended on their success. As they rounded the corner of a ravaged street, a trio of German soldiers emerged from the shadows, laughter spilling from their lips, oblivious to the peril they posed. The men froze, hearts thumping painfully against their ribs as they melted into the darkness. Every inch forward could mean disaster. It was a high-stakes game of chance, where one wrong move could lead to devastating consequences, not just for them, but for the children waiting in a world of uncertainty.